came to me with the idea, and I was like, absolutely not. Like, I'm no way ever letting anyone know that I've got this or sharing this. I think the one thing that scared me was people's pity, and I was like, I don't want people to feel sorry for me because I'm fine, I'm chilling, you know?
Yeah. I saw on your website you talk about it and saying that it needs to be a 365-day a year concept.
Yeah.
Today, very special guest on the podcast, somebody that has come across my desks, somebody that I've been researching and learning more about, Arooj Aftab. How are you?
I'm good. I'm happy to be here.
Good. I'm happy to have you here. Thank you for coming in. So you are a presenter, fashion creative, consultant, all of the above. Is that right?
You know what? When people ask what I do, I don't know. I say I'm just a bit more of a multi-hyphenate sort of person. Like,
Yeah.
I'm a creative. And I think if I just say I'm a creative, I think that sums up everything I do.
Yeah.
Sort of. But then unless they ask the detail, I'm like, how long have you got? Because
That's where I wanted to start. I wanted to be like, what the hell does a day-to-day look like for you? Like, is it different
I
every
don't
day?
even know what tomorrow's looking like,
Yeah.
let alone this weekend.
Yeah.
I don't know. Like, I feel like every day's different.
Yeah.
It purely depends on what I've got going in my head and what commitments I've made.
Yeah.
It's different. Like, it's hard to sort of describe what happens. Some days it'll be back-to-back events and meeting clients, and some days it'll be, I've got life admin, which means I need to make X amount of decks. I need to do these emails. I need to schedule some stuff,
Yeah.
or I need to just write and think creatively, or sometimes I might be in meetings. So it really depends. So yeah, I don't know how to describe it, but I say every day is different.
How do you balance that? Because what I would say is I'm one of the least creative people in the world, and I just stick to doing business. Like, that's
Your
my
podcast.
That's my,
That what?
I don't know.
I think that's
like,
creative.
I think Josh helps me look creative, but
Shout out to Josh.
Big shout out. But I just feel I'm always fascinated by people that kind of balance this creative and business lifestyle. Do you have like set days where you're like, I'm going to be creative today and I'm going to be business today? Or is it just, do they just blend into one and you just have to take yourself away sometimes, even just within your own head?
They blend in sometimes,
Yeah.
but I have to have set days.
Yeah.
And I think as a creative, you can sort of get in your own head and you run away with the creativity, but it's got to make sense.
Yeah.
Right? So you've got to make sense of the creativity, because a lot of my stuff is more about execution and output and ideas, and how can I turn this into more of an entrepreneurial thing?
Yeah.
And sometimes it isn't. Sometimes it's just a creative idea, but I have to allow myself to have business days, because I really enjoy creative days and I can get carried away with an idea or creating some artwork or working on a deck. And I'm like, all right, what's the business side of this?
Yeah.
So I have to really set days apart, but it's not something that I overthink. It happens naturally as well. Like, I work backwards. Like, most people have a business plan, then they think of the creative idea. I'm like, I need the creative idea. I need to know how it's going to look. Then I'll come up with a business idea.
Cool. That sounds good. I know we were talking just before we started about your background, and I always like starting with people's, childhoods and how they became the person that they are today. So talk to me about your background, where you're from, where you grew up.
So I'm from Bradford, West Yorkshire, very small town, a very humble upbringing. It's like when I think of Bradford, or whenever I say Bradford to people, they're like, oh my God, like Bradford. I think that's such a weird perception of Bradford, but I'm like, I'm Bradford through and through. And home is where the heart is. So yeah, from Bradford. And I grew up there, born there, raised there. My whole family's there. My parents are there. And my entire education was done there up until university. So even my art foundation, before starting university, I went to the local college. Okay. And it was a good college. And I think some people really underestimate like these smaller cities, because they don't have as much wealth in their economy. It's not seen as good enough. But I did all my education in Bradford. Then I went to university in Nottingham, studied fashion communications at Nottingham Trent University, lived there for 3 years. Then I moved to Manchester for a bit when I was working in the modelling industry behind the scenes. Then I was like, right, I'm moving to London. So 2019, I came to London, November 2019, just before lockdown.
Oh God.
What
was that like? Like moving to the hustle and bustle and then complete lockdown?
I was already back and forth from London anyway, and I was like, I think I just need to move there now. And I remember being in Manchester, And I loved Manchester, don't worry, I love Manchester, but I was getting major FOMO that I wasn't in London, because everything that I want, like, associated with, like, these events, these people, the friends that I was making were in London. Manchester, I kind of struggled to find, like, the sort of relatability sort of factor. I feel like it's great. I think now, like, I think it's changed. This is talking like 5-6 years ago, but I think now there's, like, London has a lot more different subcultures, as Manchester does as well, but I feel like London's a lot more open. It's a bigger city, there's a lot more opportunities. Sure. But yeah, my twin sister was already living here. So then when I said I'm going to move down, we just looked for a two-bed. So it wasn't like a massive change, because it was like I was just moving in with my sister. And but it was an interesting time, because I think it's when I probably flourished the most, was in that moment of silence where we were all inside.
I love that. It's always interesting to me to know, when you were growing up, were you always creative as a kid?
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, and into fashion always, or was fashion later on?
Fashion, yeah, I think fashion was, like, in the background, but I was more into art.
Right. Okay.
And like, compared to my twin sister, people would say, "Oh my God, she's academic, you're creative," and I was like, "What does that even mean?" Because I think the whole academic and creative thing is, like, so, like, judged on a surface level basis.
You have to be one or the other. Right? That's what everybody says, but it's not true.
It's not true. But I think the way I learned academically was through creativity, and it's very hard to explain that to people who don't get it. I'm like, even when I was in school and we were doing English, I'd have to, like, imagine in my head and physically see the text in front of my eyes floating, rather than reading it through a book. So it was like I had to really immerse myself into everything, and the only struggle with that was maths. You couldn't do that, so I was really sucked at that. But yeah, I was definitely more creative, and it was more art led. But the art there's still a similar pattern of how I do my art now. There was still something to the art, rather than it being, I'm just going to draw some lines and a face. Yeah.
It's so interesting to me, because I know you said when you came in you liked my trainers, but I am not someone that's on, like, the forefront of fashion. And I'm always fascinated by, I've got friends, like my cousin is he's going to hate me for saying this, but he's incredibly stylish, what I call him. Like, he's always ahead of the trend. When you were growing up, did you feel like you were always ahead of the trend, or is that something, again, that you started to learn?
See, I don't know. I never thought about that.
Yeah.
I think being in a city, Bradford's a very simple place.
Yeah.
And we had a very simple upbringing. Like, I come from a Pakistani background, and at home, like, often if I was going to see family or I was like lounging, I'd wear, like, traditional, just like a long sort of kameez, what we call it. And we're chilling. But then when I went out with my friends and I wore Western clothes, it was just something that I liked wearing. Like, but it was on trend. It was what I saw in the magazines, but it was budget shopping, because I wasn't working. I was like, okay, what can I afford, and what can my parents afford?
Yeah.
But I remember every time we had, like, non-uniform days in school, people would be like, "Oh my God, you and your sister look so cool. What does your dad do? What do your parents do?" And I realized then, I was like, okay, this fashion identity thing is actually quite interesting. But I never thought myself ahead of the trends. I just thought myself as I'm just trying to dress in what is cool as a kid, you know.
When I was doing my research, I came across your documentary, My Tumours Made Me Trendy. Talk to me about that. Talk to me about that story, because I was watching some of it again this morning, and it's a fascinating story about you. So for anybody that hasn't seen it, talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so My Tumour Made Me Trendy is a documentary that I did in 2018. So I'm going to try make this, like, quick as possible.
No. Honestly, go into as much detail as you want.
All right, fab. So my twin sister at the time, she still works for the BBC, but she was working for the BBC, and, you know, it was starting up. She just like, I want to have this role, and I want to do X, Y, Z. But my line manager says I've got to come to him with an idea that he's never heard of. And at the time I was blogging, so I had a blog, I had a website, and I was contributing. I was just writing magazines, like, free. And I was wearing oversized clothing, and I just developed this following on Instagram that I didn't really think anything of it, but I was wearing menswear and oversized clothing. And at the time, that's because I just didn't want to wear fitted clothing that showed, like, that you could see any marks or bumps. And I got nominated for Cosmopolitan Influencer Award as Best Newcomer. At the time, I wouldn't know if I would even categorize myself within that sort of industry, but I was like, oh, right, this is cool. But at the same time, when I was looking at the description and the bio, I was like, I'm being nominated for wearing like oversized clothes, but nobody actually knows why I wear oversized clothes. Like I wear oversized clothes to hide.
So you didn't share the story initially, right?
I was just purely put forward for what I was bringing, I guess, to like the blogging sort of scene. And I was like, oh my God, I feel like a bit of a fraud. And coincidentally, my sister was like, oh, like, I want to do a documentary about your condition because you're working at a modeling agency. You've been nominated for this award, but everything surrounding this leads to one thing, which is body image and the way you look. But nobody actually knows your full story. I remember she came to me with the idea and I was like, absolutely not. Like, I'm no way ever letting anyone know that I've got this or sharing this. Like, it was too personal. Then I remember having a deep think about it. And I was like, oh, you know what? It's my sister. Like, let me help her out. You know, it could help her out. And maybe I'll meet somebody with a condition. And she was like, it's going on iPlayer. I was like, oh, online, no one's going to see it. It's not on TV. Cool. I mean, I don't know why I thought that I was working at marketing guide. I was like, oh my God, like, I don't know. I think I was just so like delirious. I was like, okay, fine, I'll do it. And I remember doing that documentary. And we filmed a bit at the modeling agency I was working at the time, and I'd met Adam Pearson, who has the same condition, but his is visible. And it was an interesting time. Like, I'm trying to just like have a few flashbacks of that time doing that documentary, and it was very, like, I feel like very numb towards it, but I feel very, I remember it all, but then there's some numb parts as well, because I think it was such a weird experience to go through when you're that vulnerable and being that open.
Right.
Like, I blocked a lot of emotion out, and I was just like, I've just got to do this because
Did you have a lot of control over it? Over the whole, I guess, creative and production side?
They were very open listening to me, and plus one of your sisters on like the team, like helps. If I didn't want to do something, they were like, cool. But there was not ever something that they put forward that I didn't want to do. I think they were very sort of open with listening to how I felt and how I wanted to tell the story, but also like they gave their input of how they wanted to showcase it. Yeah. And one thing that I remember saying is that I don't want this to be a negative thing, because I'm not, I think the one thing that scared me was people's pity. And I was like, I don't want people to feel sorry for me because I'm fine, I'm chilling, you know? Yeah. And I also don't want them to treat me differently, because I've dealt with school and primary school and whatever being dealt differently compared to my twin sister, or being treated as incapable just because of this condition. But my grades and my skills spoke otherwise. So it was like, I don't want to be treated differently, but I want to share this story because I think it's important for people to know this condition that affects more than 26,000 people in the UK alone with type 1 neurofibromatosis, and it's more common than Huntington's, Parkinson's and cystic fibrosis combined. Really? And yet very little people know about it. So I was like, I need to share this story. But yeah, it was an interesting time. I wouldn't be where I am if it wasn't for that documentary, so I'm only grateful for it. It's good.
Is it not known, do you think, because people don't share their story and sometimes it's not visible, and therefore it's not like
people don't know they have it, I don't think.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because like I don't know why it's not known. Yeah, I think there's a lack of research on it. Right. Even in like since doing the documentary, the medical students I've spoken to, they don't cover that aspect as much, but they know about it. Yeah. Okay. And I don't know if it's to do with funding or whatever money's put into studying different diseases or conditions. I don't know why it's not, like, because there's people that die from this. There's people that lose limbs from this. There's people that lose mobility, or, you know, and I think, I don't know why it's not studied, but I think, I don't know. I'm not quite sure.
No, I mean, I watched it, a bit of it again today, and it's an incredible story. And I think that, as you say, it's created a bit of a platform for you. So going back to, you moved to London 2019, and in 2020, you launched Done With Diversity. Talk to you about that, about ditching this word diversity.
Yeah, so after the BBC documentary that I did in 2018, I remember that coming out in, I think, 14th of December 2018, that was released. Okay. And immediately, like, my Instagram went crazy, and press, media, brands, a swamp of them got in touch. And I remember this is an interesting part to the story. So I remember when I was working in the fashion industry, well, I still work in the fashion industry, but when I was working in the modeling industry, my mindset conformed to a system of diversity was like people that look like me or people that are not white, basically.
Yeah.
I was like, yeah, cool, okay, diversity, we need diversity, we need diversity. It was not until after the documentary I was put into the diversity box where I'd be on certain brand campaigns or like press and they'd call it a diversity campaign and nobody behind the scenes looked like me. There's people that couldn't do, like there was some black talent on set and black models on set and they couldn't do their hair, or I was like, okay, whatever, like this is weird. Then as time went on, I was the only brown girl behind the scenes out of a team of entirely white staff. And I was like, what's diverse? Because it's not my skin color, surely not. And at that time, my story was getting told less and less, but I was just the face of these campaigns. I was like, my skin color is not diverse. I don't think having a disability is either. I think it's like, we should probably normalize this because it was just a really weird concept when I was behind the scenes. And then I realized, oh my gosh, like the way people are portraying diversity makes a non-disabled heterosexual white man and woman look normal. Anybody who's not that is considered diverse. I was like, how this is just a complete concept of otherness that is actually quite damaging.
Yeah.
Because if we continue to treat diversity as an other and where white is the base and anything that's not white is diverse, who decided that? So I was like, this is weird. And then I remember being like, okay, I'm done with this word. And it was bubbling towards summer of 2019. I had to really think of how I'm going to do it. And then January 2020, I launched it.
Amazing. And you obviously go in and you speak to businesses and you help strategize and you talk about this concept of being done with diversity. So what can businesses and brands, and because we work with so many brands with our creators, and a lot of the times, and obviously won't name names for certain brands, but it is a tick box exercise.
Yeah.
You know, Pride's coming around in June. I know that our roster with those creators that fit a Pride campaign are going to get way more business than they do the rest of the year, and then you don't hear from that brand again. So what's your advice for brands and agencies and just businesses in general to get rid of that diversity? Because I think that a lot of brands and agencies and businesses, they do see it as this tick box exercise. So how do you go in and how do you advise on that side of things?
The thing is, like, I plant the seed more than telling people what to do. I'm like, I think people have to listen. I'm like, look, people are not seasonal. Like, that's one thing you need to know is like gay people aren't just getting Pride. Muslims aren't just Muslim on Eid or Ramadan. And black people aren't just Black and Black History Month. And I'm like, why are we like treating this like a Tesco Christmas advert that comes around once a year? Like, people are relevant 365 days of the year, yet you're capitalizing on a month. And plus, I think the way businesses work is I think they care more about, I guess, the economy we're in is how they're going to make money.
Yeah.
Which is fine, like you run a business, but I think they forget they'd make more money if people were sort of relevant all year round, not just seasonally.
Yeah.
And how much consumer spend they're missing out on. But it's a hard one because I'm like, look, people are not seasonal, but we can also implement these people in regular campaigns without it being a campaign completely about what they are, who they are. Like, it's just being included. And I think saying just include them is a massive difference to being do more campaigns around them.
Yeah.
So include them in what you've already got. Like, pop them in with some other talent, but do it organically because it fits their audience and it fits you, not just being like, now we've got a campaign for this, this, and this.
Yeah. It's so true. And I think that it's been an interesting concept for us as we've grown our roster, because our roster, when we first started, we just wanted to sign anybody. It was my wife and I, and we just wanted to sign anybody we could. But as we've grown, we've wanted to grow a roster that, as you say, it's not about ticking boxes and making sure we've got diversity, but it includes everybody. But it's difficult when we're working with brands and they come to us for Pride or Black History Month or, whatever time of the year it is. And I know what you're saying about the seasonal thing. And I saw on your website, you talk about it and saying that it needs to be a 365-day a year concept.
Yeah.
And that 9 times out of 10 brands get quite lazy. I think you call it lazy marketing.
Yeah, lazy marketing.
Yeah, talk to me about lazy marketing. What does that mean as a concept for you?
Lazy marketing is when it's given to you. I think if you're not really thinking outside the box, you're waiting for the seasons to come to be like, oh yeah, it's time for us to do this. I'm like, what are you doing? It's really frustrating because Ramadan's just passed, Eid's just gone, and I was participating in that month.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's a hit and miss because sometimes you see things happen, sometimes you don't. And equally, both are frustrating. And then sometimes you see the same people just get in every campaign and sometimes you see none.
Yeah.
And that's what lazy marketing is when I think either when the same people are constantly everywhere or when you just wait for these seasonal, whatever you want to call it, to come for you to then take opportunity. I think businesses really need to sort of work on creativity and campaign outputs. I think there's so much to be done. There's so many ideas. And you know what? It's not even having ideas or concepts. It's, again, just include them. Look outside the box. Like, diversity is not black and white. It's not brown and white. It's that and everything in between.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you can't have one or the other, then this and this, and be like, we've done the job. And I think the thing that bothers me a lot about the lazy marketing side, it is so based on surface level and not beyond the surface. There's been plenty of times where I'm like, all right, I want to see people's stats and stuff of their teams. And people, I know we have brown people. And I go behind the scenes and everyone's Indian. Like, I'm like, that's not diversity because you just, that they're all from the same place.
Yeah.
So that is not, it's like, it's got to be way beyond surface level. And I think that lazy marketing thing that I talk about has to sort of look at everything beyond face value. Like, black and brown is just the surface level. Now what's beyond that and what the makeup of that black and brown community is a big thing. Even even disability, visible and non-visible, I think it has to be beyond surface level.
Yeah. Well, when you're working with brands, maybe on like content creation or on your own social media, for example, what kind of research do you do about those agencies or brands before you start to work with them on that topic?
It's interesting. So I often just like, as far as like, honestly, like looking at one's Instagram page gets you a lot of information that you need. And also the website and just seeing like what talent they've worked with. And I think I try not to make a judgment too quick because I'm like, I'm that person that I like to give people the benefit of the doubt. And I always say, you've got to meet people where they're at and then just work with them where they're at. And I think there's always people and everyone can do better. And I don't think there's ever like this judgment of being, oh my God, what are you doing? I think in my mindset, I'm like, oh, come on, really, in this day and age? But I try to meet people where they're at. Yeah,
it's interesting, isn't it? Like, I think for businesses, and I'm only talking from our business or from the brands that we work with, I think that what happens, like you say, is even from a profitable point of view, they always go through their seasons. So they have Christmas period, they have summer periods, they have Easter periods, and they all have their own targets and profit to make, as you say. But then they always look at their campaigns in such a vacuum. And because they're looking at it in a vacuum, they just go, oh, it's Pride. I know who we need to get. And it's like, no, you kind of need to look at what your brand is standing for and what your brand is wanting to be over the next 10 years. Not just what you want it to be in June.
Yeah, I mean, that's funny you say that because there's been plenty of times where there's one particular brand which I don't want to name, but they did something. I'm just going to give it away. Let me reword this. There's brands that have these messages, but the same people that are dropping talent because they've spoken out about certain things.
Got you. Yeah.
And I'm like, this is really confusing. Or there's brands that have certain campaigns, but their ethos and their values and who they might have as their investors or whatever, it says another thing.
Yeah.
And I'm like, it's like,
how does that
I think like people, like there's a lot of information online and it's not like people like me that are looking at it, it's the Gen Zs that are like ready to go in guns blazing and question these people, being like, hang on, you've done this campaign, but this person on this exec said this about this, and they're the ones that are running your business, or what do you have to say about that? And I think it's an interesting one. That's not to say people can't have their opinions and thoughts, but I think the value of what you're doing needs to align. I don't think people need to do Ramadan campaigns for the sake of doing Ramadan campaigns. I don't think people need to Pride for the sake of doing it. I think they need to do it because it suits them organically.
Yeah.
And it suits who they're serving organically, because they need to be, as you said, they need to be going for 10 plus years. And it's not about the talent they're getting, it's about the consumers they're bringing in. Now, if you're not catering to the consumers that are coming in, then why the hell are you doing the campaign? Like, it's like even for like sustainability, like brands that come in and they get one person that might have a disability or be like visibly sort of disabled, and they do one campaign with them, but the rest of their clothing doesn't actually suit people with disabilities or plus size women or whatever. So I'm like, the whole thing needs to be looked at like as a longevity purpose, not a one-hit wonder, quick marketing tool and a quick fix. And I think a lot of the time we're in a day and age where everything's a quick fix. And I'm like, this is not serving anyone, because working on these campaigns for a quick fix, you're then probably annoying a lot of people who are then calling out your brand. Then you're like, apologize. I'm like, let's just...
it's a vicious circle,
yeah, it needs a vicious circle. It needs to be on a longevity purpose, and that takes time.
Yeah.
I think it's better to take time than do something because you feel like you need diversity.
You know, the clients that you're going in to consult with, strategize with, are the majority of them looking at it over a certain campaign or project, and they're looking at it in that kind of vacuum, or are they looking at it long term?
A lot long term. I think a lot of them have the vision for long term, but they want it done in a quick amount of time, which is understandable. Like, people that I've spoken to are here for a long term basis, and often I like to work with people that don't want to work with me just once.
It doesn't work. You can't just work once on a project like this.
Yeah, like it depends really what it is. If it's like a one-time project, it's got to serve that substance that it needs to have. But often, like, a lot of people that I'm speaking to are more long-term, which is good.
Yeah.
I think it's changed from when I first started doing this. It was like, we have this campaign, can you quickly come in and blah, 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 just advise us. And now it's more based on, we're doing this, and in the next 6 months we want to do this, but then we might have other avenues for X, Y, Z with this amount of budget and stuff. So they're thinking about it, which is good. Yeah,
no, it's amazing. In terms of your own socials, so they blew up after the documentary, and it goes back to the diversity question, but we obviously work with loads of content creators, and one of the main things we have to help them with, which isn't exactly, I guess, in our job role, but we take it on as such, is the hate that people get online, especially when you're a content creator and you're putting yourself out there. Now, you're putting yourself out there in many ways, not just on social media, but in terms of your business and working with clients. Have you experienced much hate online, and has that increased, decreased since you've grown? Like, what's it been like?
You know what? Touch wood, I haven't.
No.
I haven't had it. I haven't had it bad as when people have it. Like, I've had one or two, like, not one or two. I'm playing it down. I've had like racist people in DMs, like the P word or this or that. Like, really? But that's just really random accounts. Like, I don't really care. But I've not had a full on touchwood hate campaign. And it's like, I'd like to think that I don't ever, because I'm not here to like hurt anyone. I'm here like trying to speak facts, and I don't think any content creator does hurt anyone. But I don't know. I haven't had it. And I think even if I have, I'm very oblivious to it. But I as far as I'm aware, I've never had to deal with like really awful messages. Like, there has been like comments in the past, but it's nothing that I've like lost sleep over, you know. It's just like whatever. And sometimes it might be about done with diversity, and it's someone like being really fragile about it. And I'm like, I'm just talking about beyond surface level.
Have people ever like misunderstood the concept? And they've kind of been like, why are you saying diversity is not a good thing?
Yeah, they have.
And how do you go back at them like at that and try and like explain the substance?
I think people, there's a right in what different people say, and I think I take on board what other people say, especially when it's translating me to audience. And I'm always hearing people out, so it's just a matter of replying to them, and they're like, oh, great. So some people then understand it and be like, oh, okay, I see. Rather than me going and being like, shut up or whatever. I don't do that. I don't do that.
Just block.
Just go away. And so, when you sort of explain it and break it down to them, they're like, oh, you're done with diversity when it is X, Y, Z, not you're done with diversity. I'm like, yeah. So that is a sentence for anyone else to finish. Like I've left the start and whatever you want to finish with, like I'm done with diversity being tokenized. I'm done with diversity being a tick box. So it's that kind of stuff. So I'm done with diversity being surface level, and it's like, it's looking way beyond the surface. Whereas people have their different thoughts and being like, well, diversity is a variation. But I'm like, yeah, but we need to look, I'm looking at it from a marketing perspective, not a general perspective. I'm looking at it from a fashion industry, content creator, marketing perspective, and how the word behind the scenes is treated.
Yeah. It's probably a really, really great thing. I always find it great when people get not called out, but questioned on concepts, because it makes you think about your concept in more depth. It makes you be able to explain your concept way better, because you're like, right, I need to now explain this to somebody who didn't understand it the first time I said it. So I always find it quite a comforting thing when that happens. Yeah. And you mentioned about the fashion industry then, and it's based, around the fashion industry. I'm obviously not, as I said, I'm not in the fashion industry. I have no idea about it. I had Ben Gallagher on the podcast a few weeks ago, and he works in, I think he calls it pre-loved fashion, like reselling items. What's your opinion right now on diversity and inclusion in the fashion industry? I mean, I guess like to narrow it down, at least within the UK.
I need to think of this one for a bit, because it's great.
Yeah.
Well, that's good. It's good. There's still a lot of work to be done.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like when we look at British talent coming through, I don't know how, I feel like it's difficult for people to get into places because the foundations are not set for them. And I think that's not only the fashion industry's problem. I think it's the economy, socioeconomic reasons that everything plays a factor: class, socioeconomic reasons, where you're from, what language you speak, how you look. And I think like the fashion industry is a great hub of creativity. That we have some great British designers, we have some great talent, we have some great artists, we have some great stylists. But I think there's always work to be done. I think there's still a lot of work to be done as far as South Asian talent goes. I know there's an incredible amount coming through and have been already that have been doing incredible work, but it's still behind the scenes. I think there's a lot of work to be done. And I think even when it comes to funding and nurturing new designers and coming in a really, really owning British talent, like I think there's a lot more thought to be taken in how we're scouting talent and how we open up, because I know plenty of friends that have gone to the US and been picked up straight away.
Yeah.
And but why is it taking them longer to get noticed in the UK?
Yeah.
Is it economy reasons? Is it like just location issues? Or I don't know, and I don't know if that's the mindset of consumer or if that's the mindset. So I'm trying to figure that out, because there's great talent that have come from the UK that are now majority based in the US because they've blown up in the US.
Really? I mean, are they going to certain places in the US? Like
Probably, certain like bigger cities, yeah. And I do think there's a big factor in this country and how we, like, I feel like the fashion industry is one factor, but the economy and how the arts and how fashion and how like people can actually get into the industry is one thing. I'm from Bradford, so I remember like I used to save my dinner money that I used to get from school, and I used to like be like, oh, I'm going to buy a ticket to London. I could never afford it, so I could just about afford Leeds and Manchester return. I was like, I'm just going to jump on the train here and just do something. And I feel like it's hard for creatives to financially be who they want to be fully and be like, I'm going to do this, unless you have some sort of financial family wealth that can back you. But I do think in terms of the fashion industry, I think there's a great sort of path we're going down in which we are seeing a lot more storytelling and culture and what British culture really is. Like the Burberry campaign that came up like recently under Daniel Lee was an incredible sort of moment. The logo changed. Daniel's from Bradford, West Yorkshire. That is a big thing within itself. Like you think, oh my day, someone from Bradford is...
That concept of role models is a huge importance in any industry.
Yeah, and I think we're going in the right direction. I think I think there's always work to be done, but I'd like them going in the right direction. I think in terms of work that needs to be done is just allowing more space, and there's always more space, but having a seat at the table. But once you have that seat at the table, being able to speak when you have the seat at the table. But I think we are going in the right direction. I really like the way Burberry's new images and who they got in their recent campaign, who they had on the runway. There was variation of South Asian to black to white models, and I'm like, oh my god, okay, we are seeing this is Britain. This is what it looks like. And we're going in the right path, but I just think in terms of what needs to be done, I think there's more of an issue to do with economy and how we also branch outside of London, but make things London. Like, I think there's so much talent in the north and so much talent in London, but how people are getting spotted, it's a very hard thing to do. I know like it's a massive sort of industry. It's very saturated, or it can be very saturated, but I'm like, surely there's a easier way for people to wanting to get into the industry, no matter where they're from, no matter what their financial circumstances. If talent's talent, how do we get these people in? I think that's where my mind has gone recently, more than it being like other issues. I think I've realised how the economy really affects how diversity and inclusion plays a part in the fashion industry.
Who in your mind, and this is quite a big question, but whose job is it to fix this or improve it? Or do we need to get right down to grassroots? Do we need to be talking to these big institutions and the companies and the fashion houses? Who is it that we need, or is it a mixture of the two?
It's a combination. I think it's grassroots, definitely. I think like government and policies and funding and grants, all that is another issue. And I think these big institutions is a different separate issue, but I think they're not all, don't have the same issue, but then one person can't work if the other person doesn't do their job, and so on and so on. It's the big domino effect. But in saying that, like the fact, like as far as I'm aware, like there is a step being taken to make, I think actively there is a lot of people that are wanting an inclusive fashion industry, but the limitations to get that lie down to policy, government. You've got to get this authorization, we've got to do this and this and this. So it's funny because I used to be like, oh my god, why is this person so talented and not getting this and ultimately be like, it's because they're from here and they're this and that, and maybe that does play a factor, but I think the more I'm here, the more I'm realizing, oh my days, like the country and the institutions that we are built on actually affects everything, because you've got to think that there has to be a budget to pay diversity and inclusion consultants. There has to be budgets for everything. There's cost in quite a lot of things, and training, whatever it might be, but that can't happen if people don't have the funding or the money for that. And I do believe there is actually some people do have the money for that, but I don't know, people's priorities are different, which is why I'm trying to just not like make a decision or judgment on how it is, but I'm trying to just learn the factors that could play a part.
An open conversation.
Like, is it the economy reasons why diversity and inclusion is such a lack in the fashion industry? Is it because people don't have the budgets to actually build these teams and get who they want to get people behind the scenes? Because there's a lot of talent that can work behind the scenes that could then cast or scout upcoming fashion designers, upcoming stylists. But I feel like right now it's happening very slowly, but we've had some incredible talent come through, like Bianca Saunders, Priya Loalia, you know, even the British Fashion Council announcing the new gen wave. And these are designers that have just probably come out of university and just have maybe done one or two collections or one collection. So there is like slow change happening, but I think there needs to be, we need more of a better sort of, we need a bigger eye in the overarching and other creatives as well.
I always relate any creative industry back to the music industry, because that's how I came through, and I've got friends and I've got family who work in music. And what you said earlier about it's expensive to be a creative, in that I would imagine that fashion's very like music, that there isn't great money in it until you get to the higher levels of being within your industry, which means that it's a very difficult industry to fund yourself. So when you're talking there about the funding and the finance side of it, I think that's actually incredibly important, because if you're going to push people into those industries, they need to know that they can live and feed themselves and have the time to be creative.
Like fashion designers, how they're sourcing the fabrics, how they, if they want to do their first collections, how do you get noticed without putting your work online but not having a physical project? How do you get noticed if you're a designer and you want to make your first collection but you don't have the finances to fund that?
Yeah.
And I think that is a very important conversation to have, because that does halt the diversity inclusion side, because there's people that are from lower income backgrounds that have an insane amount of talent but can't afford to be in that talent. And I know there's a lot of funding schemes, there's a lot of them, but not everyone gets those opportunities, and not everyone knows about those opportunities.
They're few and far between, I can imagine.
And then that to me, my head's now go, well, that plays back into the education system and universities and schools, and who are they talking to about these funding projects? Who are they looking at? So now, are they the problem because they've only given it to certain people and they're not looking beyond? So it's not only like purely the fashion industry's thing, even though obviously they're the big factor, but I think we've got to look at it as an open book. We've got to look at it as in the education system, universities, who's being let onto the graduate courses, who's graduating, who's getting a job once they graduate.
Yeah.
And then that all then becomes in the fashion industry. So there's a lot of people in this. It's not, I think, a lot of people look at the fashion industry and they can be like, if they're not in it, like, don't get me wrong, 5 years ago, 6 years ago, I'd have been like, oh, why is I know X, Y, Z? Now that I'm in the industry and I'm talking to a lot of people, a lot of creators are struggling to fund or even create their first collections, and the funding they're getting either isn't enough or they're not getting noticed to get that funding. And then that goes, who's behind the scenes to notice or scout talent or whatever. So there's a few factors that...
Has funding dropped since COVID? Like, obviously we're all living in a cost of living crisis at the moment, recessions, hyperinflation. Has funding dropped in the last, let's say, 2 years, even 18 months?
That's one thing I'm not entirely sure about. I've seen a lot more funding come through, if anything. I've seen more, I've seen more mentoring schemes.
Right, okay.
Like Anita, who runs Diet Prata, does like these mentoring sort of schemes. And Daniel Peters, who also has his own consultancy, does these mentoring things, and these people are being connected to XYZ. So there's a lot of people like consultants that have launched their own mentoring schemes that then they get funding from more sort of a budget from these brands, whether it be LVMH or whatever. So I think people are now navigating in their own spaces as well. And then people are going to individuals more than institutions, which is an interesting concept.
Yeah, no, for sure. It's a fascinating concept, and it goes across so many different industries, but it's cool to talk about the fashion industry because, like I say, I know very little about it, but it's very similar to a lot of the creative industries that I've been a part of, or I've got friends in or family members in. How important would you say social media is to all of this, and the ability that we didn't have maybe 10 years ago to, if you wanted to be a designer or a stylist, to frankly just
you'd be walking in the door and being like, look at my work.
You had to like literally get an interview in these places, and you had to really hustle. And I'm not saying you don't have to hustle now, but you now have these platforms. What advice do you have to young creatives wanting to get into the industry about how you can leverage your socials?
All right, let's take a look at music, for example, right? TikTok. How many new artists have come over the sound of TikTok?
Wild.
That's the example I give. I'm like, right, like, you do not know who is looking at your page. That's it. You do not know who's clicking on it. Like, I don't think done with diversity would be where it's at if it wasn't for social media and Instagram and the hashtag on Instagram and then people resharing it. That was my sort of primary research to test the waters on how it's going to be received. Because of that, it turned into a consultancy. It was to be a campaign and whatever. Like, I'm speaking to brands online. Now it's like, oh, do you want to come behind the scenes? So it's interesting, right? Wow, it's interesting. I'm like, treat your social media, if you're creative, treat your social media like it's your portfolio, but not too corporate. Have a bit of like a sprinkle of personality, have a bit of sprinkle of events, whatever you want to do, and then your work, but but make it in a subtle way that's like, you can tell you're creative, you can tell what you do, but it's not like, am I just looking at someone's business online? So, but yeah, the power of social media is insane, like incredible. Short form video, static images, AI, AR, oh my gosh, you can be who you want to be, like sound, music, whatever it is. Like there's so many ways to implement creativity. And I think, I always say treat it like your creative portfolio and post your work. Like post it. Obviously don't post like give everything away, but post elements of it in which if someone needed a set designer, they're like, oh my God, this person is a set designer, I've just come across them. Let's get in contact.
Let's reach out. It's
or this person sets flowers, I've just come across. Like it's the most, you don't know what people, you don't know who's gonna be looking at your page.
No. Yeah. I think that's amazing advice. And I think that, because it was interesting. So was your socials, were they big in any way before the documentary? Like, did you have a bit of a following?
Yeah, I had a bit of like just under 10,000 before the documentary.
And then it kind of grew to kind of
60 something.
Wow, that's a big jump.
Which is interesting. I was like, when that happened. To be fair, no, it was like, I think it grew to like 40 something. And then Instagram put me on their actual Instagram account, which at the time they had like 314 million followers. And they sort of shared my story about having neurofibromatosis and doing what I was doing. And then that's why I got like another extra 30,000.
That is...
So it was interesting,
mental. Like to get that kind of recognition. And then off the back of all that, you've been recognised in so many publications. So Stylist, BBC, Vogue, 100 Innovators, Business Innovators. Tell me about that. Like that's just got to be... I can just imagine from you growing up and wanting to be in this industry and then being recognised like that is just a complete like 360 moment.
It is. I remember when that happened and I was like I was just like, me? Like, what have I don't know.
How do you find out?
What do I do? So I actually, I don't know if I'm allowed to say, but I'll say like, I got an email beforehand. They were like, hi, Arooj, just let you know that we are excited to tell you that we are putting you forward for, you have been chosen to be in the XYZ. This is an embargo. This will be announced on XYZ. So I sort of knew 2 weeks before it was being announced because I just sent them some headshots. And I was like, but when I got the email, I was like, me? I don't even know what I do. I was like, what? So I was like, this is me. But so it was like a real, but even now it's like you said, like I grew up being like looking at these people in the industry and now some of them I'm in a list with. Like, I was like, I read these person's articles when I was like 13 trying to do a scrapbook or whatever. And now I'm in a list with them. Like, oh, now they follow me on Instagram and now we talk sometimes. It's crazy. And I think it is a full circle moment, but also it's also in a way where you look at it and being like, you get this sort of imposter syndrome, but then you're also really proud because it's like, I've got so much more I want to do. And I really, this means more than you can imagine.
Yeah.
But I've not even shown a quarter of what I'm trying to do yet. But however, this recognition is amazing. And this is something that it's incredible to see people like viewing your work. I think as creatives, as individuals, whatever it is, like we are our biggest critics. And I think...
Oh God, yeah. I stayed up until midnight last night just thinking like, there's nothing in my head, just thinking just stupid things. And then I'm like, just go to sleep, just like you'll be fine.
Same. I think I slept at like 3 a.m., 4 a.m. We'll try and talk about, but and it's always like you're constantly criticizing yourself, and not in a manner that's always negative, but it's always like, I need to do better, I need to do better, I need to do better. So how people perceive things is so interesting to see, you know? And sometimes I think you've just got to sit and be like, okay, I've not had the moment to do that yet, but you sometimes just sit and you're like, just look at what you've done and how far you've come. And then let that be the motivation to work harder. Like these like awards and articles, I see them more as like stepping stones, and they're gonna help me get into the next stage that I need to get in this industry. And I think having the Vogue Business 100 Innovators to my name is really like, humbling as well. So
you mentioned something so interesting then, where you're talking about giving yourself the recognition that frankly you deserve, but it's quite difficult with individuals to do that. I spoke about this on a previous podcast, that we're sometimes our worst we're the worst at giving ourselves props for anything. And I find when I'm doing it and I sit there and I go, oh, I've done all right in X, Y, and Z realm, I feel like an imposter. I feel like I'm being arrogant.
Yeah.
I feel my ego coming in, and then I'm like, no, I don't want to feel that anymore. And I think about how bad I've done on some things, and then
But does that come from because we fear what other people view us as?
Yeah. 9 times out of 10, I would think that. 10, yeah. But I was gonna say, like, how often do you sit back and I guess smell the roses and go, God, yeah, I have done all right?
I'll be fully transparent. Not often.
Yeah.
Not a lot. And it's like, even when I meet people, they're like, oh my God, Arooj, you're doing so well. I've seen what you're doing.
Yeah.
And I don't know what to say to them. And it's like, oh, thank you so much. Like, you too, you know, because they like these people I'm smashing it like online. I'm pretty sure then if I compliment them, they feel the same. So I think you realize a lot of people feel the same.
Yeah.
But I think it's funny because I was having this conversation with a friend, and it was all about like this idea of contentment when you're creative, and you're constantly adding things onto your list of things that you need to do. And this idea of contentment is so far, because you get one thing and now you're like, all right, on to the next. I need to now get something bigger or better. And I think sometimes the best thing someone said to me is just, you are where you wanted to be. And just sit down, just breathe for a bit. Yeah. You are where you want to be, because enjoy the calmness or enjoy the moment now, because when it's going to get busy, it's going to get busy. Just enjoy it for now.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm trying to do, and stay present. And I think that a lot of people like myself and creators, we struggle to stay present. It's either we're thinking about what we said to someone in an email, or we're like, oh, did I word that right? Or it's either what we're thinking about what we need to do the next day, or we've had an idea come to us and now we're visioning our future 5 years ahead. So I'm like, right, it's got to really be like
that
present.
being content with your life is such a weird concept for me, because like you say, if you'd have gone back to Arooj at 16 years old and gone, this is going to be your life, and you said, right, and that's all you're going to have, like from the day you die, then that's your life, you'd have bitten their hand off. But and I think I forget who it was. Maybe it was Grace Beverly. I saw posted something literally like 2 days ago, being like, the next few days is going to be really stressful.
Oh, I saw that.
You've got loads of exciting things coming up, but remember, you're living your vision board from a year ago. So enjoy it. Try and enjoy those moments. And it is so true that whether you're an incredible, stylist or actor, or whether you're running a big company, or whether you're just like living a quote unquote normal life, you have to sit back sometimes and not be thinking about the next thing, or you're never really present, right?
Yeah, and I think that switching off is the hardest thing to do. But I do think like it's a weird analogy, because it's like there's a friend of mine who works in like really like maths person, and he's like deep into like spirituality, and he's like, yeah, but he goes, you've got to think it this way. When you get paid a wage, like you are not going to pay the same wage. Let's say when you first started, your wage would have been like really like £3.50 an hour, like when you were like a teenager, or 17K starting a grad job. You could still do the same things you're doing now in that wage, right? In a similar manner, but now you've got maybe a bigger wage and you're still doing the same things, but they're more pricey. So your value changes over time, but your sort of I'm trying to word this, how your sort of output stays the same. So I think your environment can change, which means your desirability changes. So when you get more money, you're going to spend more.
Oh yeah, of course.
When you get less, you don't have the desire. You just be like, all right, I'm going to do what I need to do. Like, it's like when I go back to Bradford, it's such a simple, people get up, go to work, come home, that's it, chill. And I always go back to Bradford to slow down. And it's such a way, because it's like, wow, the north and south is so different. And I think when you are around the hustle and bustle and like they say, comparison is a thief of joy. Like, you could have just done the most incredible thing, but now you've seen someone else do something that you've also been wanting, or you're like, oh, I wish I was there too. But I think just take a look at what you've got.
I think London's quite bad for that, because at the moment you do something cool or exciting, somebody next to you's done something cool and exciting, and you're comparing yourself. And I actually think that's...
But then you don't feel good enough. Be like, oh, I don't want to shout about it because I feel embarrassed now. And it's like,
And it's the same with socials. Like, I had a guy called Timmy on the other day, and he was talking about how he's curated his social media, the people that he follows on socials, because he was constantly just like looking what other people were doing, and he was like, I just want to go on social media and be positive. Like I don't want to be comparing myself all the time. I know that we just said that we need to smell the roses and look at now. So this is a terrible segue, but like, what's the future for you hold? Like, what's next for you?
I think the next for me, actually, you know what? I've got so many ideas. I've got loads of ideas coming up. I've got some things that I'm outlining in my head that I need to sit down and properly plan.
Yeah.
But the next few things for me is you'll probably see a Done With Diversity rebrand. I can definitely say that's happening.
Nice.
And a few more projects, which I don't want to like.
No.
Here's what I'm doing.
Yeah.
But it's looking good, God willing, and I'm just here to. I'm here to flip the table, basically, and
nice.
But in a good way. Like I think the thing about these conversations is that they have to be open.
Yeah.
You've got to be open-minded, and I think now going in is trying even more avenues than I've tried. And I think that's come with confidence to be like, I'm going to try this way. But yeah, so Done With Diversity rebrand and a bit more open out there. Yeah.
Love it. My final question for you is, and I'm trying to ask everybody this, what's the biggest lesson you can share with the listeners or the watchers, whether it's from a personal point of view or from a business point of view, that can help them in their life?
I think you always figure it out, and what you're wanting isn't as far as you think it is. I think that's one thing I've learned is that either something can be taken from you straight away, or you can get it really fast. But yeah, I'd say it's not like you always figure it out, and I think that's why I leave it. I think if you're passionate about something, you'll figure it out.
Just keep going. Figure it out. Arooj, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. It's been one of the most like eye-opening, mind-provoking conversations that I've had. So I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
All right, speak soon.
See you soon. Bye.